Now is probably the worst time to try and buy a Ural.
RevelatorAlf.
Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf. So this video is all about buying a motorcycle or a used motorcycle and how to spot a dud or how to spot a bad deal. So what's going on in the world right now? Some bikes you might not even be able to get a hold of, or certainly parts you might not be able to get a hold of as well. So let's say for a Ural, for example, they're always a bit of a lead time to get those anyway. I'm talking about the brand new ones now. But obviously what's going on with Russia and Ukraine right now, actually that you might struggle to even get one at all. So who knows what's going to go on in the future. Now I'm in the process of trying to buy a used motorcycle, well, a couple actually, a moped and a 125 250 trail bike as well, and I thought I'd share with you the kind of problems that I'm encountering right now. So these are the things that I've seen recently, and maybe you're experiencing the same thing, or maybe you have experienced the same thing. So first of all, the usual places where you would buy motorcycles from the past, you know, they're very hit and miss. I'm finding eBay and also the local classifieds, let's say, which, you know, they don't really exist anymore. You know, again, hit and miss whether you'll find something and whether the search result, you know, a come back exactly what you need. If you go into somewhere like Facebook Marketplace as well, again, there seems to be lots of ads there for bikes, not necessarily bikes that seem to ring true. So this is what I mean by ringing true, or whether you can spot there's something not quite right with the deal. So let's just say you look at a bike and it's they've changed the engine. They say it's registered at a particular cc, but they've changed the engine. Now that might not be a problem as long as the paperwork is correct. You've got to bear in mind that if you're going to buy a bike and you're going to ride it legally on the road, then you're going to have to prove that it is legal to be ridden on the road. So if people have been starting to change engines out of bike, let's say from a 50cc to a 125, for example, whilst it might be okay, you don't know what work they've done, you don't know how they've done it, so you're gonna, you know, if you're gonna go down that route, you need to investigate it a lot more, and then you need to take advice and see, okay, is that actually allowed? Then you're going to have to check all the paperwork. So if they're charging quite a bit of money for that bike, then it might be a bit of a red flag for you. So watch out for engine changes on bikes that actually change what the original bike was. It might not necessarily mean that it's a bad bike or a bad deal, but it's just something to be aware of. Okay, so the next thing to really watch out for is bad communication from the seller. So if they put an ad out for their bike and they haven't really given you a lot of information, and then you ask a few questions, let's say by email or whatever, by the contact messaging system that they've got, whatever platform you're using, and then they don't answer those questions, or they only answer one of those questions but they don't answer the other questions, for me that's another red flag as well. So you know, you want to get as much information before you actually go and look at this bike. And if they're not giving you all that information, then I would just hold off a little bit, especially if you have to travel a great distance to go and see it. If you can get them on the phone and speak to them directly, that's even better. But if you can't, and they're not answering any questions, or they sound very vague when you're asking specific questions about the details, about the history of the bike, or whether it's got any paperwork as well, that kind of thing. And this leads me on to my next point as well. Okay, so if you're looking at a bike that hasn't got any paperwork, any titles, registration papers, that kind of thing, so in this country we call them V5s, basically that's not an issue itself, but you have to make sure that that bike has not been stolen. You need to see some kind of proof of ownership of that bike. Now that might not always be possible, so it really depends who you're buying it from. So you kind of have to gauge this a little bit, and yeah, I know you have to go on first impressions, you know, the way somebody is, how they're living, where they're living, that kind of thing. and see, does this sound as if it's a good deal or a bad deal? Does it sound as if it might be stolen? That kind of thing. So you might be able to do, if it's got a registration plate, you might be able to do an online search quickly to see if it's registered as stolen or anything like that. Now, getting registration papers is not a problem. Here it costs about £25 to re-register it, but somebody else may have a claim on that bike as well if it's been proven to be stolen. So you might get yourself into some legal issues by buying a bike that's not registered anywhere. That doesn't necessarily mean, again, that there's a problem with the bike or problem with the seller. It's just something that you need to investigate as well. Okay, so one of the things that you should always look at when you're buying a bike is what work has been done to that bike in general. Is it been done at home? Has it been done by, a service mechanic? Is there a service history? All these things really help. Now, if you find that a bike has been ridden and serviced by the owner, then you may need to dig a little deeper as well as to what servicing they've done, how have they done it, that kind of thing. If they've actually done any mechanical work, how have they done it, to what specifications, have they followed a workshop manual, let's say. If you go at their home, have they got a decent set of tools or not? So if they say, yeah, they've worked on their bike and they've refitted engines, or they've broken engines down, or refitted swing arms, all that kind of stuff. But then you go to their place and you can't see any tools anywhere, and there's no place for them to actually work on their bike. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that they haven't done it properly, but it's a red flag again, because you want to know that at least somebody who's worked on that bike kind of knows what they're doing, really. So that's something to bear in mind and also to look out for. Anytime you go looking for a bike, just keep your mind wide open and your eyes wide open as well. Just always looking for those red flags, and always be prepared to walk away if it doesn't seem quite right. Okay, one of the other things to look at is, I suppose one of the things that we all look at first of all is the price. And for me, this is a big red flag when I see something that is completely out of a price range of what it should be. If something is really, really cheap or really, really expensive for what it is. Now, really, really cheap is a bit hard to detect these days, especially if you're going on auction sites like eBay, because it hasn't reached its full value. And also, if you're looking at bikes that are on auction, you might get a good deal anyway. Basically, there aren't many people interested in that bike at the time, so it's going for really cheap money. But if you're looking at classified ads, then make sure that what you're buying is a complete bike, or it is what it's supposed to be, rather than some kind of knockoff bike or something that's half intact, or that it might be broken in some way, or it might be stolen, whatever, so somebody might be selling a bike just to get rid of it quickly, especially if it hasn't got any paperwork as well. So look at those indicators to see whether the bike is priced correctly, and if it's too cheap, then why is it too cheap? Conversely, if it's too expensive, then why is it too expensive? What is it that the seller wants you to pay extra for? Now, it could be that they've completely gone through the bike, they've stripped it down to its nuts and bolts, let's say, they've put it all back together again, and they've spent a lot of money on it. So then look at the receipts. They've basically taken an older bike and they've completely restored it. Then you say, okay, well, this bike is a little bit more expensive than I wanted to pay, but look at all the work that they've done, and you can see it's virtually a brand new bike. Therefore, that's why it's more expensive. Look at the parts that it's got on it. Are they standard parts? Are they non-standard parts? All these things will tell you whether you're getting a good deal or not in terms of underpaying or overpaying for a bike. Now, one of the final things I look at when I go to buy a bike is, again, I look at the bike, but I also look at the person who I'm buying the bike off. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that you shouldn't buy the bike from somebody that you don't particularly care for. but it's a good indicator to see how that person is with you and if you can trust them, if you can trust the sale of them. Now, this is not always easy to do, and it's not always black and white, of course. Judging somebody and how they interact with you will kind of give you an indication of, are they telling you the truth? Are they giving you all the information? Are they giving you information that you can believe in or you think is plausible? That kind of thing. Because again, you're buying a bike off them, and you want to make sure before you hand over your money or you do a bank transfer or whatever it is, that you know what you're buying. Now, if you're buying a bike that it needs complete restoration, let's say, and it doesn't run and all that kind of stuff, then it's already broken, and you're going to have to spend money on it. So, just make sure that what you're being told is correct, and then look at that bike and look at how much you're being asked to pay for it, and then how much money you're going to have to spend to make that good again, or make that bike a runner again, or put it back on the road, let's say. Those calculations that you're going to do are going to be crucial in determining whether what you're being told is correct. Also, how much it's going to cost you to put it back on the road. So what's the total package going to cost you? Now, some people will say, yes, it's a fair price. Other people will say, well, actually, regardless of what I'm being charged here, even if it's a good deal, the price to repair all these parts is just going to be way too much for me, even if you can do the work yourself. Okay, that's something to bear in mind. Anyway, so look, this is some of the things that I've been encountering recently again, and I thought, it's something that you might find interesting when you're going to look at bikes. It's not always black and white whether you're going to get a good deal or not. There are lots of different factors. And of course, you need to just go in with your eyes wide open and not be too quick to go and buy something that is basically overpriced, or it just doesn't sound right, and it just doesn't look right as well. If something looks really bad and it's overpriced for whatever reason, or it looks really good, let's say, and it's very underpriced, big red flags here. So watch yourself, watch what you're spending your money on, and try to get a good feeling about the deal just from the communication that you're having with the seller as well. Because if they're not giving you all the information that you want, if they're really abrupt, that kind of thing, then let's face it, it's their loss that somebody else can deal with them. You can just walk away and go and buy a bike from somewhere else. Simple as, really. Anyway, over to you on that one, I suppose. But I'm still searching for a bike, or two, or three. The workshop is primed, ready for action. So let's see what I find. But anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. But for now, don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell, like and share. Check out the website, RevelatorAlf.com. Ta-da!